A tin of Hawkins Cheezies sat on a shelf in a kitchen in Tweed, Ontario, for 31 years. Nobody opened it. The grandmother who bought it in 1956 said it was the last tin from the original factory before the fire, and she was keeping it the way her own mother kept a christening cup. Number 22 on this list was invented in a Montreal bakery in 1901 and tested at a hockey game. Number 14 was named after two boys in a Beauce farmhouse during the Depression. Number 8 on this list was extruded by a machine an Ohio farmer built by hand. These 25 snacks were so strange sounding that American visitors refused to believe they were real, even when families brought them out at Christmas by name. Hit subscribe and stay with us. Here are the 25 old Canadian snacks that sound fake but are totally real. Number 25. Sucre à la crème. A square of brown sugar fudge cooling on wax paper in a kitchen in Trois-Rivières, the way every Québécois grandmother prepared it for Christmas Eve. Brown sugar, butter, cream, and a wooden spoon you used until your wrist gave out. That was the whole recipe. The method was simple and cheap, and mothers passed down the timing by feel, generation after generation. Never by a thermometer. One thing I noticed in the old Beauce recipe books, every grandmother wrote the same word at the bottom of the page: patience. The fudge had to be beaten until the gloss broke and the surface turned matte. Children stood beside the stove and waited for the spoon. Now, in a province where maple sugar was the working currency of every farmhouse pantry, sucre à la crème was the dessert that cost almost nothing and tasted like Christmas itself. You didn't need a recipe card. You needed a grandmother. That was it. Number 24. Crispy Crunch. Harold Osen was a candy roller at the William Nielsen plant in Toronto in 1930, and he wanted to make a bar that would not melt on a streetcar. He layered peanut butter so thin it shattered between your teeth, then wrapped it in dark chocolate that snapped when you bit down. The bar was simple, cheap, and incredible the first time you tasted it. Nielsen sold the brand to Cadbury in 1996, but the recipe never changed. Canadian kids back then unwrapped the yellow paper at recess and shook the crumbs into their palms. American visitors would ask what the texture was. Nobody could explain it. The peanut butter was not creamy. It was not crunchy. It was something in between. The way a graham cracker is something in between a cookie and a biscuit. You had to bite one. The texture was the whole bar, and Nielsen knew it. They built the line around it for 60 years. Hickory Sticks. Skinny, smoky potato sticks the color of toast. Salted hard, tasting like a barbecue you forgot you were standing next to. Hostess Foods made them in Cambridge, Ontario, when they were still the best potato chip company in the country. Every working dad packed a wax paper bag of them into a lunch pail beside a bologna sandwich. The sticks survived the bus ride, the locker, the whole shift at the mill. In 1996, Frito-Lay folded the Hostess name into Lay's, but the sticks kept their shape, their burn, and their following. Here's the thing. You can still spot the red bag at any gas station between Halifax and Hope. The recipe sounds fake when you describe it. Skinny, salted potatoes that taste like smoke. The bag is 30 seconds away. Hostess called it a snack. Working dads called it lunch. The red bag still gets opened on coffee breaks across the prairies every working day. Number 22. Whippets. A soft cookie base, a dome of marshmallow, and a thin shell of dark chocolate that cracked the moment you pressed your thumb into it. Charles Theodore Viau invented them in his Montreal East End bakery in 1901 and walked the first batch into a hockey rink to test the crowd. Hockey fans liked them. The Viau plant baked them on Cremazie Boulevard for over a century, and Montreal mothers stacked them on saucers beside cups of tea, the way British grandmothers stacked digestives. In 2004, Dare Foods bought Viau and moved production to Cambridge, Ontario. The cookie got a little smaller. The crack on top still sounds the same when your thumb finds it. There were 8 cookies to a sleeve, and that sleeve never lasted past Wednesday, because the dome under the chocolate was simple, sweet, and beautiful in a way no other cookie was. Quebec mothers stocked them by the case for school lunches and church potlucks well into the late 1980s. Number 21. Yum Yum Chips. Two brothers in Warwick, Quebec, named Paul and Louis Gelbert, bought a small chip plant in 1959 and started making potato chips for the corner dépanneurs. In 1978, their kitchen invented a recipe that would mark every Quebec childhood for the next 4 decades. They called it all dressed: ketchup, barbecue, sour cream, salt, and vinegar, all pressed into one ridged chip in a yellow bag. The flavor sounded made up. American kids visiting cousins in Montreal would taste them and ask if Canadian children really ate 4 flavors at once. Yes, they did. They still do. Every gas station for Gatineau to Rimouski stocks a row of those yellow bags by the cache. Yum Yum is still Quebec family-owned, still in Warwick, and the all-dressed recipe has not changed since the day Paul Gelbert wrote it down. Ridges, salt, ketchup, gone. The bag is the same yellow it was in 1978. The recipe is the same Paul Gelbert wrote on the back of an invoice that summer. Number 20. Coffee Crisp. Wafer layers of bitter coffee cream sandwiched together and dipped in milk chocolate, sold in a brown sleeve printed with a steam curl. The bar started in the 1930s as a Rowntree experiment in England. The British shelved it. The Canadian arm picked it up, ran with it, and watched it become the best-selling chocolate bar in the country by the late 1970s. The slogan, "Nice cup of coffee," ran on television for decades. American tourists used to fill suitcases with them. A petition once asked Hershey to bring it across the border. The petition failed. You still cannot buy a coffee crisp legally in a New York bodega. The wafer was light, the coffee cream was bitter, and the chocolate was thin enough you could feel each layer crack between your teeth. That fact sounds invented. It is not. Coffee Crisp sits in every Canadian Tire snack aisle and every Tim Hortons lobby cooler from coast to coast. Number 19. Wagon Wheels. 2-gram biscuits with a marshmallow center, dipped in chocolate, the size of a small saucer. William Peschert sold the patent to Gary Weston in 1948, and a Weston factory in Sheffield started shipping them across the Commonwealth. Canadian production landed at Vio McCormick's in Quebec, then moved to Dare Foods after Dare bought the line in 2001. Every school lunch in the 1970s had one in the bottom of the brown paper bag, flattened against an apple. Children swore the wheels were larger when they were small. Adults swore the wheels were larger when they were small. The recipe never changed. Memory is the only thing that did. Even now, when you unwrap one in a grocery aisle, the marshmallow center is the same dense pillow it was back then, and the chocolate is the same thin shell that cracks under a thumb. Wagon Wheels are still sold by the box in every Loblaws, every No Frills, every Prairie corner store east of the Rockies. Number 18. Pop Shop Cream Soda. Bright pink, vanilla marshmallow sweet, bottled in a stubby brown returnable that you carried back to the depot in a wooden case. The Pop Shop opened in Burlington, Ontario in 1969 and ran a chain of warehouses where you bought 24 bottles for less than the price of a single restaurant pop. Saturday mornings, dads loaded the cases into the trunk and let the kids carry them to the car. Pink cream soda was the Canadian rule. Americans drank it clear with vanilla, which sounded wrong to a child raised in Hamilton or Sudbury. Crush, the other Canadian brand, was bottled in the same neon pink and stocked next to the Pop Shop stubby. 2 pinks. 1 country. No explanation. The Pop Shop still bottles the same recipe today, still in a stubby that fits in your hand the way it used to fit in your father's. 2 pinks, 1 country, no explanation. And the color is still on the shelf at every retro grocer in Burlington. Number 17. Bovril. A glass jar of dark beef paste sat on the counter of a Canadian senior's kitchen for as long as anyone could remember. You spooned a teaspoon into a mug, poured boiling water on top, and drank it like tea. Hockey arenas across Ontario sold mugs of Bovril at the concession until the early 1980s. Grandfather swore by it on the cold walk home from church. Children took one sip, made a face, and asked for hot chocolate. Bovril is technically British, and it has been sold in Canada since the 1880s. Here, it became a winter ritual that the British eventually abandoned. You still find the small jar at any No Frills, sitting beside the Marmite. The thing is, your grandparents really did drink hot beef on a saltine like it was the most normal thing in the world. It was the strangest snack you ever saw on a cracker. The jar still sits in church basement kitchens across Ontario, used now by a dwindling generation that still drinks beef tea. Number 16. Big Turk. Magenta Turkish delight, rose-flavored and chewy, coated in a thin sleeve of milk chocolate, wrapped in red, white, and blue paper. Nestle Canada launched it in 1974 and never sold it anywhere else. The first time you handed one to an American cousin, they bit through the chocolate, hit the magenta jelly, and asked what was wrong with it. Nothing. Canadians grew up on it. It is still on every drugstore shelf, still magenta, still flat, still wrapped in the same striped paper. The bar advertises 60% less fat than the average chocolate bar, which back then was the kind of fact a parent used to justify a snack to a dentist. It is the only Canadian candy that tastes like a flower garden. Nobody ever asked Nestle to fix it. The recipe works. The bar sells. The magenta stays. The wrapper has barely changed since launch, and that itself is now a Canadian retail oddity worth keeping. Number 15. Mr. Big. The longest chocolate bar in the country. It is vanilla wafer, caramel, peanuts, Rice Crisps, and a coat of milk chocolate, all rolled into a bar so long it would not fit sideways in your blazer pocket. Nielsen launched it in 1979 with a slogan that asked, "When you are this big, they call you Mr." Hockey kids unwrapped them on team buses between Sudbury and North Bay. Grandparents said the bar was too much for one person. Teenagers said that was the entire point. Cadbury bought the line from Nielsen in 1996 and kept the bar the same length, the same wrapper, the same shape. You buy one today and the size feels like a joke. The wrapper is the same yellow and red. The wafer still snaps. The peanuts still rattle when you shake it beside your ear. The bar is not a joke. It is a working senior portion in a chocolate sleeve. Hockey kids on team buses still snap them in half and trade the second half for a juice box. Number 14. Jos Louis. A red velvet sponge cake, 2 perfect rounds with a white cream center, dipped whole in milk chocolate and wrapped in a single sheet of waxed paper. Joseph Arcady Vachon and his wife Rose Anna Giroux opened a bakery in Sainte-Marie-de-Beauce in 1923 with a horse and a small oven. By 1932, their 5 sons were old enough to deliver bread on bicycles, and the family was making pastries that traveled better than fresh loaves. Rose Anna based the new cake on the May West that was already being sold in the Montreal bakeries, but she wanted hers richer, darker, dipped in chocolate instead of dusted with sugar. She named the cake after 2 of her boys, Joseph and Louis. Not the boxer. The brothers. The name became one of the most recognizable in Canadian grocery aisles. During the Depression, a Jos Louis cost 5 cents and traveled to a school lunch in a paper sleeve that didn't crush. Quebec mothers packed them into the lunchboxes of children walking 3 miles through snow to a one-room school, and the chocolate stayed glossy until noon. By the late 1970s, the Vachon plant in Sainte-Marie-de-Beauce was running 3 shifts and shipping cases across the country, and the family business that started with 1 horse-drawn delivery cart had become a national brand sold from St. John to Victoria. American grocery chains tried to buy the brand twice. Quebec families pushed back hard enough that the deals collapsed. Rose Anna's youngest grandchildren still ran the operation into the late 1980s, and traditional Vachon snack cakes remained a Quebec icon long after the family stepped away. The cake is still wrapped one at a time, one to a sleeve, the way Rose Anna designed it, 8 to a box, and the box rarely makes it past the weekend in any farmhouse kitchen between the Beauce and the Gaspé. Ask any Québécois adult about a Jos Louis, and they will describe the wax paper before they describe the cake. The part that surprised me when I first read the Vachon archives was how rural the family stayed. 3 generations ran the bakery before they sold to Saputo, and not one of the Vachon brothers ever moved to Montreal. Number 13. Half Moons. The Jos Louis without the chocolate. A pale white sponge dome, a thin layer of vanilla cream, dusted in icing sugar, sold 2 to a pack. Vachon shipped them to corner stores across Quebec for kids who wanted the cake and not the coating. The package cost less than a Jos Louis, and most farmhouse kitchens in the eastern townships kept a stack on the bread shelf. Grandmothers unwrapped them at the kitchen table after supper, dropped the icing sugar onto the oilcloth, and said this was the cake they grew up on, before the chocolate version arrived. The Half Moon was the original. The Jos Louis was the dressed-up cousin. Most Canadians outside Quebec have never heard of it. Quebec cousins still pack a sleeve when they drive west. The cake is cheap, simple, and beautiful, and the sponge tastes the way it tasted in 1933. Quebec corner stores stack the packs by the cash, and you still see grandfathers picking up a sleeve on Sunday mornings after church. Number 12. May West. A Montreal cream cake classic. The cake that came before the Jos Louis, made in Montreal in 1932 by Stuart Limited and named after the movie star Mae West before her name had its modern spelling. Vanilla sponge, white cream filling, a coat of chocolate that crackled when you broke the wrapper. Vachon bought the brand in 1979 and added it to the lineup beside the Jos Louis and the Half Moon. The cake traveled across the country in lunch pails for 60 years. American visitors saw the wrapper and asked which cousin invented it. Canadians shrugged and said both. By the late 1980s, the spelling had quietly shifted from May to May, and nobody seemed to remember why. The cream is still the same recipe. The chocolate still cracks the same way. 3 cousins, 1 Quebec family, 3 generations of school lunches packed by tired mothers across the country. The Mae West is the elder of the family, and Quebec families still buy them by the case for the holidays. Number 11. The Persian. An oval cinnamon roll the size of a small pancake, fried until golden, then frosted with a thick swirl of bright pink berry icing that nobody has ever fully named. Strawberry, raspberry, maybe both. Art Bennett invented it in his Thunder Bay bakery in the mid-1940s and named it after the American general John Joseph Pershing, who was rumored to have stopped at the bakery during a visit. The recipe is a guarded secret, passed down through a single bakery for over 70 years. Bennett's Bakery still bakes it on Algoma Street, frosts it pink, and sells it 4 to a box. Outside Thunder Bay, almost no Canadian has ever tasted one. Inside Thunder Bay, you do not order coffee in the morning without one beside it on the saucer. The pink icing alone sounds invented. It is real. The Persian is so local that ordering one outside city limits gets you a confused stare. Bennett still sells the Persian every morning before the bakery doors even open. Number 10. Caramilk. It is the bar Cadbury Canada built around a single question. How do they get the caramel inside the Caramilk bar? The slogan ran for 30 years on television, in newsprint, on bus shelters from Halifax to Vancouver. Cadbury never answered. Children grew up assuming there was a sealed factory in Toronto where workers had signed lifetime non-disclosure papers. The bar was a row of milk chocolate squares with a soft caramel center that ran out the moment you bit down. Cadbury still produces it at the Gladstone plant in Toronto. The caramel is still inside. The secret is still officially a secret. It sounds amazing. It is. Ask any Canadian over 30 how they get the caramel in the bar, and they will recite the slogan back to you the way you would recite a national anthem. Cadbury never broke the secret. The bar still sells in every drugstore and corner shop in the country. Number 9. Eat more. Dark toffee, peanuts, unsweetened chocolate, no milk, all pressed into a flat brick wrapped in a yellow, red, and green sleeve. The Loney Company in Montreal invented the bar in the early 1930s and ran a contest to name it. Angus B. MacDonald of New Waterford on Cape Breton Island won. His prize was an Art Deco clock made to look like a measuring tape. Hershey Canada bought the Loney lineup in 1987 and kept the bar exactly as it was. Eat More is chewy enough to pull a filling out, sweet enough to stop a sugar crash, dark enough to taste like something a coal mining grandfather would have carried in his lunch pail. American visitors call it strange. Canadians call it lunch. The wrapper has not changed since the 1930s, and the bar still pulls between your teeth the way it used to pull between your fathers. The Cape Breton naming contest is still archived at the Loney Museum, and the prize clock is still listed as missing. Number 8. Hawkins Cheezies. A short orange cheddar log the color of a maple leaf in October, baked instead of fried, dense as a pencil eraser, salted hard enough to leave fingerprints on a kitchen towel. Willard Trice Hawkins and his Ohio business partner James Marker built the company in Tweed, Ontario in 1949 with a hand-built extruder marker designed himself. A fire took the plant in 1956, and the family rebuilt in Belleville, where the same machine still runs today. Here is the thing. The grandson, Kent Hawkins, kept the operation small on purpose, refused to sell to a multinational, refused to swap the cheddar for cheaper powder, and refused to grow past what the Belleville plant could handle. The bag still says Hawkins. The cheddar is still real. Ask any Canadian over 50 about Cheezies and they will tell you about a kitchen drawer that always held a bag. The Belleville plant still ships them in the same waxy paper bag, the same bright orange, the same powerful little log of cheddar that crumbles in your fingers. Number 7. Mackintosh's toffee. The hardest candy a Canadian child ever tried to break with a kitchen drawer. The bar came in a yellow box with red lettering, each piece sealed in wax paper, and the instructions on the side said to slap the box flat against a hard surface before you opened it. Grandmother slapped it against the linoleum. Grandfathers used the heel of a boot. The toffee shattered into jagged pieces and you sucked on a shard until your jaw ached. John Mackintosh started the company in Halifax, England in 1890, and Rowntree Mackintosh merged with Nestlé in 1988. Nestlé Canada still produces it. The yellow box still sits at the cash. You still slap it before you open it. That is part of the recipe. No other candy in this country tells you on the wrapper to hit it before you eat it. The yellow box on the cash counter is one of the most familiar Canadian sights at any small-town grocery store. Number 6. Nibs. Stubby black licorice cylinders the size of a thimble, sold by the bag in every theater lobby in the country. Y&S Candies opened a Montreal plant in 1908 and started making nibs by 1931. Hershey acquired the line in 1977. Canadian kids fed handfuls into their mouths during double features, chewed through the licorice while the second reel started, and walked out with their teeth stained black and their fingers smelling of anise. The candy is technically the same as the bottom inch of a Twizzler, cut and packaged on its own. American audiences mostly ignored it. Canadian audiences ate it by the pound. You still find the wax paper bag in any cinema concession, from Calgary to Charlottetown. Now, your grandparents called it black licorice candy. Your kids will call it medicine. The bag is still on the shelf either way. The wax paper crinkles the same way it did during the Saturday matinees of the 1950s, and the smell of anise still hits you when you open it. Number 5. Maynard's Wine Gums. Hard, chewy fruit gums shaped like miniature port, sherry, claret, and burgundy bottles, embossed with the wine name in tiny letters. The first batch was made in London by Charles Riley Maynard in 1909, and Maynard nearly refused the recipe because he was a strict Methodist who did not drink. His son convinced him there was no actual wine in them. The line moved to Hamilton, Ontario in the 1990s when Cadbury bought the brand. The Hamilton plant still ships them across Canada. Children spent decades trying to figure out if any of the gums actually tasted like the wines printed on them. They did not. The names were a Victorian joke. The gums survived the joke for over a century, sold in a black and red bag in every Canadian convenience store, eaten by grandparents during long drives the way Americans ate Tic Tacs. The Hamilton plant ships them in the same red and black bag your grandmother kept in the glove box of every old Buick she ever owned. Number 4. Glosette raisins. Dark raisins coated in a thin, glossy chocolate shell. They were sold in a small cardboard box that rattled when you shook it, the lid popping open with one thumb. The Walter M. Loney Company in Montreal launched the brand in the 1930s and named it after the gloss on the chocolate. Hershey Canada bought the line in 1987. Every Canadian movie theater carried the box beside the Nibs and the Twizzlers, and a box could last through an entire feature if you were careful. Glosette also came in peanut and almond, but the raisin was the original. American kids visiting cousins in Montreal would ask why a Canadian thought raisins belonged in a chocolate-coated box. Canadians never had a good answer. The box is still on every concession shelf. Still rattles, still pops open, with one thumb the way it did in your grandfather's hand. The cardboard rattle is the sound every Canadian over 40 associates with a darkened movie theater. Number 3. VICO chocolate milk. A glass bottle of cold chocolate milk that nobody outside the prairies and the eastern townships ever knew existed. The Sherbrooke Pure Milk Company in Quebec started bottling VICO in 1911. The Saskatchewan dairy producers picked it up in 1972 and shipped it across the prairies in stubby, returnable bottles delivered to the back porch. In the eastern townships of Quebec, every grocery store carried it. The brand name became the generic word for chocolate milk in two parts of Canada that had never spoken to each other. Sherbrooke shut down in 1976. Saskatchewan kept it alive into the 1990s. Latterie Royale in Beauce still bottles of VICO today. Two regions, one name, one drink, no overlap. Generations of kids in Regina and Magog asked their mothers for VICO the way American kids asked for Nesquik, and neither group ever realized the other existed. Two regional brands, identical name, no shared marketing, separated by half a continent and a language line. Canadian retail history rarely repeats that pattern. Number 2. Garlic fingers. A round of pizza dough the size of a dinner plate, smeared with garlic butter and parsley, blanketed in mozzarella, baked until the cheese blistered, then cut into long strips like ladder rungs. The dish came out of Halifax pizzerias in the early 1970s, the same year Halifax invented the donair. Garlic fingers traveled across the Maritimes in octagonal cardboard boxes from Pizza Delight in Shediac, then Greco Pizza after 1991. You ate them with your hands and dipped each strip in a sweet condensed milk donair sauce that nobody outside Atlantic Canada has ever heard of. Order them anywhere west of Quebec and the server will ask you to draw a picture. In Halifax, every pizza order ends with a side of fingers. That's the rule. Maritime kids grew up assuming the rest of the country ate them too. The rest of the country did not. The octagonal Pizza Delight box is still the easiest way to spot a Maritime kitchen on a Friday night. Number 1. Dad's Cookies. Crisp oatmeal coconut rounds the size of a coaster, dense, chewy in the middle, sweet enough to crack between your teeth like a thin pane of toffee. The first Dad's Cookie plant opened in Regina in 1929 in a small white frame building on Dewdney Avenue. Mondelez Canada now bakes them, but the recipe has not been altered since the original opening. Kids drop them into glasses of cold milk and watch the edge soften before lifting them out by the center. Grandmothers stack them in Tupperware on top of the fridge and check the level after every grandkid visit. The cookie sounds like 1,000 other oatmeal cookies on paper. One bite tells you it is not. The coconut is what makes it work. The oats are what make it stay together. Number 1 on this list is the cookie almost every Canadian kitchen has held at least once. The Regina plant is gone, but the cookie that came out of it is still on every grocery shelf in the country. The recipe still untouched. That tin of Hawkins Cheezies on the shelf in Tweed, Ontario is still sealed. The grandmother who saved it is gone. Her granddaughter keeps the tin where she found it, beside a box of Dad's cookies and a sleeve of Whippets, because every one of these snacks was a real product, in a real grocery store, in a real Canadian home. Tell us in the comments which snack pulled the strongest memory back, and what province your kitchen sits in. The strange ones, the magenta ones, the pink ones, the chocolate-coated ones. They sound fake. They never were. They were the small, ordinary things that made a Canadian childhood feel like home.